All right, today we are digging into, literally, one of the internet's most enduring and just plain bizarre legends. It's a story that kicks off with a regular guy, his piece of land, and a hole in the ground that, well, according to him, it just had no bottom. Get ready, because we're talking about the mystery of Mel's Hole.
I want you to really think about this for a second. Let's say you buy some property, right? And out back, there's this pit. You and your neighbors, you start using it for junk, old trash, you know how it is. But here's the thing, it never fills up. It just swallows everything you throw in, and you don't even hear it hit the bottom.
Now, this isn't just some hypothetical question. A guy named Mel Waters actually claimed this was his reality. Back in 1997, he calls into this late-night radio show, and he lays out this exact story. He says he's got this property out in Manistash Ridge, Washington, and he's sitting on what would become one of the biggest modern myths of our time.
Okay, so let's start with the hole itself, because believe me, long before we get to government agents and weird creatures and all that, the stuff Mel was describing right from the get-go, it was already completely mind-bending.
So Mel, being a fisherman, gets curious. He does what any of us would probably do, right? He ties a weight to a spool of fishing line and just starts lowering it down. But then he needs another spool, and another, and another. He claimed he let out over 80,000 feet of line. That's more than 15 miles straight down, and he never ever hit bottom. The line just kept on going.
And oh, the weirdness was just getting started. For one, the hole was this perfect circle, 9 feet 9 inches across, with this strange stone wall lining it. And if you drop something in, total silence, no sound at all. His dogs? Yeah, they wouldn't go anywhere near the thing. Wildlife steered clear too. But the absolute craziest story, a neighbor's dog died, so he threw it in the hole. A few days later, he swears he saw that exact same dog, same collar and everything, running around in the woods, alive, but acting like it had never seen him before in its life.
So, you've got a story this bizarre. Who do you even tell? Well, back in 1997, there was really only one answer. You call Coast to Coast AM. This was the legendary late-night radio show for all things paranormal, hosted by the one and only Art Bell. And Art, he took these calls very, very seriously. And once he went on the air, things just exploded. The day after his first call, Mel says he goes back to his land and finds it totally cordoned off by armed military guys. A few days later, a neighbor calls into the show, freaking out, saying they saw this beam of pure blackness shooting out of the hole and up into the sky. And then, poof, Mel just vanishes for 3 years.
So when Mel finally resurfaces, he tells this story. He says they told him there was a plane crash, a cover story, but there's no record of any crash. Then, a guy in a suit, your classic man in black, shows up. He basically tells Mel the land isn't his anymore. And oh, by the way, it'd be a shame if they found a drug lab on his property if he didn't cooperate. The offer? A huge chunk of change every year to lease the land. Get out of the country and just shut up. He took the deal. But then, surprise, surprise, his bank account was mysteriously empty.
Okay, so after years of total silence, Mel pops back up. And if you thought the first story was wild, you haven't heard anything yet. He claims he was contacted by a Native American tribe. Why? Because they knew of another hole. This one was out on public land in Nevada, and somehow it was even stranger than the first one.
And this is where the story just goes off the rails in the best way possible. I mean, the hole in Washington with its stone wall, it sounded kind of natural, right? Weird, but natural. But this Nevada hole? No way. It had a solid metal collar and lining going down into the dark, and you could feel actual heat coming off of it. The first hole just scared animals away. This one? This one seemed to be home to something that played by a whole different set of rules.
So to try and figure out what was going on with this new hole, Mel and the locals run this wild experiment. They take a bucket full of ice and lower it about 1,000 feet down into this warm pit. When they pull it back up, the ice hasn't melted. But it's not cold anymore either. And then, and this is the craziest part, they put a match to it and the ice catches fire. And he claimed it burned for months.
Okay, flammable ice is one thing, but what would this hole do to something alive? They had to know, so they took a live sheep, put it in a crate, and lowered it down for about 30 minutes. When they pulled it up, the sheep was dead. Looked like it had been cooked from the inside out. But that wasn't even the shocking part.
So they do a makeshift autopsy on the sheep, and inside they find this huge tumor. But when they cut it open, what they found was impossible.
Mel describes it as a fetal seal, still attached by an umbilical cord, and it looked back at them with the eyes of a human.
And get this, after seeing this creature, which he said actually crawled out, went to the edge of the hole, and jumped back in, Mel claims something incredible. He'd been diagnosed with terminal cancer before all this, and now it was just gone. He was convinced that whatever happened down there had completely healed him.
So, yeah, that is one heck of a story. Maybe a little too incredible. So let's take a step back. How does any of this actually hold up when you start asking some hard questions? It's time for a big ol' reality check.
Well, once you start digging for actual evidence, the whole story pretty much crumbles. First off, geologists will tell you an 80,000-foot deep hole is just physically impossible. The pressure and heat would make it collapse in on itself. Then there's Mel Waters. No public records exist of anyone by that name ever owning property there. And that military blackout on the mapping software, it happened after he made the calls, which kind of suggests it was a reaction to the legend, not proof of it. And the biggest thing, in all that time, Mel never once produced a single photo, a single recording, nothing.
And that really brings us to the biggest problem of all. For all the stories, for all the late-night calls, nobody has ever found this hole. I mean, people have been searching that area for decades, using every clue Mel ever gave. They've found old mine shafts, wells, but nothing, absolutely nothing, that matches the legend.
So if there's no proof, if the hole probably doesn't exist, then why are we still talking about Mel's hole all these years later? And that question, that gets us to the real magic behind this whole thing. You really can't talk about Mel's hole without talking about Art Bell. See, he wasn't a journalist trying to fact-check a story. He was a master entertainer. He created this incredible theater of the mind for millions of listeners in the middle of the night. He knew exactly how to let a great storyteller tell their story, asking just enough questions to make it better, but never pushing so hard that the whole thing would just fall apart. And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? Whether Mel Waters was a real guy or just a character, his story wasn't just some simple lie. It was a masterclass. It was perfectly built for radio. It starts with this creepy, kind of believable idea, and then it just slowly dials up the weirdness. You get government cover-ups, you get impossible science, you even get a monster. It was the perfect urban legend for a pre-internet age. So in the end, we're left with this really interesting question. The physical hole, the pit in the ground, it almost certainly never existed. But the story of Mel's hole, oh, that is very, very real. It's still out there. And it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? Which one is actually more powerful? The boring, verifiable truth, or a story that's just too good not to tell?